The Leica M5 was, at one point in time, my favorite film camera. It's a camera that I bought 4 years ago, and it has fundamentally changed the way that I interact with photography and think about ways of seeing with a camera. I'm very happy that I got to experience the Leica rangefinder system, but things are changing. I don't really use the Leica M5 much anymore. It's sitting on the shelf, which is, it's kind of a shame that a camera like that just sits around collecting dust. And at this point, it's destined either to become an heirloom or something that someone else could enjoy more than I do now. And yeah, I'm leaning towards the latter. This, however, doesn't mean that I will stop shooting film. As long as film is produced and made, I will still shoot it because it's just so good. But something had to change. And that's why I got this. The Canon 30V, otherwise known as the 7S in Japan, and the Elan 7NE in North America, it's a pretty standard looking late era film camera. As an experience, the Canon 30V can't hold a candle to the M5 in terms of the way that makes you feel when you're using it. This is a very clinical camera, but there are a lot of handy features, autofocus being one of them. Little pop-up flash, not to be underestimated in a pinch. The continuous shutter modes, the eye tracking autofocus, which has this thing apparently where it tracks your eye movement and it will focus on where it is that you're looking within the viewfinder. Not that it's ever worked for me. Apparently you have to train it or something. I don't know. Someone can tell me in the comments. My absolute favorite thing about this camera is that if you were to hold down the shutter in continuous shutter mode, because it's 4 frames per second, you would burn through an entire roll of portrait in 9 seconds, which is pretty kinky if you ask me. And like I was saying, the 30V is a clinical camera. It is a practical camera though. It doesn't weigh much. It can be replaced very easily because the bodies are, at time of recording, pretty cheap. It shares a lens mount with the Canon 5D that I also have in my collection. So that means I can take a digital and a film camera body to the same shoot and not have to swap around lenses with adapters and faffing around with that, which is super handy. Now, you may be thinking, Matt, the rangefinder experience is bar none. How could you possibly want to give up on that experience? And to that I would say, I've moved on. It was fun while it lasted. It was a summer romance, if you will. A fun time we had together, exploring new parts of ourselves. And yeah, it's just the spark is gone, the dream is over. Now that I work as a freelancer, the way that I think about photography has significantly changed. And the practicalities of my kit need to be addressed first and foremost. And having a lot of money tied up in one camera is just, like, it's just not really working for me. You may have also noticed that I've been really loving portraits lately. And it's not like you can't do portraits on a Leica camera, but I will say that it is a little bit easier with other cameras, and it's also much cheaper with other cameras. So why am I telling you all of this? Now that I owned a Leica, even though it wasn't a very nice Leica by Leica standards, it definitely changed the way that I feel about photography and the way that I see things. But here's the thing. Film photography, in the contemporary sense of how we understand and interact with it, is fundamentally at odds with everything that photography is now. The way that we interact with photos predominantly is digitally. And film, of course, was never intended to exist in a world that was digital. And the way that you have to go from start to finish is just so laborious and time-consuming and costly that I just need it to be as streamlined as possible in order to get the results that I want. At the end of the day, that's what I'm really driven by. I'm driven by the results that I can get from the cameras that I use. So I need these cameras to function and be as optimized as possible for what it is that I'm trying to do. It would be a different story if I was a street photographer. A Leica absolutely makes sense in that particular genre. If I was a landscape photographer, using large format or medium format, absolutely that makes sense. But because I now operate in this weird sort of in-between of doing a bunch of different stuff, I need my camera to be as versatile as possible for the job. And unfortunately, the Leica is just not that. God, it feels like I'm firing someone the way I'm saying, we really need to streamline the process. Yeah. And look, maybe one day I could end up with another Leica. Who knows? But in the meantime, while I'm focusing in on my work, making sure it's the best that it possibly can be, this is what I feel is the right move. And I hope it helps you in some way to think about photography in a new way, to be a little bit more pragmatic and less caught up in the luster, the nostalgia, the experience of using a mechanical film camera, but rather feeling how can you achieve the best results that you can get for what it is that you're going for. I hope that made sense. Subscribe for more.